Over the course of my career shooting documentary photos and video, I've taken camera gear into some seriously rough environments, from deserts to jungles to the tops of mountains, and over the years I've figured out what I can trust to keep working and what falls apart as soon as you take it out of the studio. I'm just getting ready to head out for a long shoot in the middle of the forests of northern British Columbia, and so it seemed like the perfect time to talk about what gear I trust to get the job done. In this video, I'm going to get into the cameras, tripods, lights, bags, audio, all the key things I'm taking with me for the next 4 months in the elements. By the end of this video, I'm sure you'll pick up a few new ideas for what works and what doesn't in remote and difficult locations. And right at the end, I'm going to share one of the most unusual things I take on the road, something I never really hear people talking about on YouTube, but that's bailed me out of more than one tight spot. So let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Luke Forsyth, and on this channel, I teach the skills I've learned over 10 years working as a documentary filmmaker and photographer. If you're into that kind of thing, make sure to hit that subscribe button because I've got new videos coming out every week. Okay, right off the bat, I just want to say that this isn't a video about budget filmmaking gear. Most of this stuff is on the higher end of price when it comes to run and gun shooting, though it's still dirt cheap when it comes to Hollywood standards, and it's taken me about 10 years to get all this stuff together. I definitely didn't start with all this gear, and I still managed to make things work, so please don't think that you can't get out there and shoot in nature without spending tens of thousands of dollars. Start with what you can afford and grow over time, and my philosophy is to never ever buy on credit. But if you're looking to invest in some professional grade stuff that can take a beating, here's what's worked for me. First, let's talk about the cameras, because you're obviously not shooting anything without a camera. Maybe one day someone is going to make a cinema camera that's also weatherproof, but I kind of doubt it. I shoot with Sony cameras just because I always have, and right now I'm using an FX9 as a main camera and an FX3 as my B cam. There's nothing particularly rugged about these cameras compared to other brands, but I will say that I have not treated these cameras gently, and they just seem to keep working. The only real modification I've made to the FX9 is to replace the stock Sony handle with this metal one from Wooden Camera. Just because it's a little more solid feeling, but also because in the past I trashed an FS7 when moisture got into the handle. Basically, I was filming in a hazmat suit in Africa and sweating like crazy, and every time I carried the camera by the top handle, sweat was just pouring out my sleeve and onto the handle. The handle is connected electronically to the rest of the camera, and after about a week of this, the camera shorted out. I've had it in 3 different repair shops trying to figure out the problem, but it seems like no matter what they do, it keeps having power issues. So I'm hoping that by getting rid of the handle on the FX9, I'm removing one more point of vulnerability. On top of that, I have these rain covers for each camera. This one by Portabrace is specifically for the FX9, and it fits pretty well. Any rain cover makes the camera quite a bit harder to use, but if it starts raining and you have to make the choice about whether or not to film, definitely use the rain cover. They're not 100% waterproof. They're not rubber or anything. I'd say actually they're more like rain jackets. Eventually they'll soak through, but they should keep you going for quite a few hours. If you don't feel like spending $300 for a rain cover, I used an ordinary backpack cover like the ones with the elastic ring around them that stretch around your bag. I'll find an example of what I'm talking about on Amazon and link to it in the description. It's not quite as perfect of a fit, but it will definitely keep the camera dry, and I still carry some of these things with me. The elastic will wrap around the back of the camera, and unless there's a crazy strong wind, it should stay on. The problem is that the lens is still sticking out from the front, and once the front element gets wet, it can be really hard to dry it off. The look of a few raindrops can add to the mood of a shot, but pretty quickly it gets streaky and blurry and hard to see anything. And trying to find something dry to wipe it off with can be next to impossible when it's pouring. So instead I use a matte box with a French flag or an eyebrow or whatever you feel like calling it. The lens hoods that come with the lenses are okay, but a flag that sticks out 6 inches will obviously do a much better job. A flag will also be handy when shooting in super bright overhead light because if the sun hits your lens at a certain angle, it can totally wash out the colors. So they're useful in a bunch of different ways. I use this one from Polar Pro. It's called the Base Camp, and I got it because it's really light and also because it was on sale. It's an added bonus that I can put filters into it. I have some variable NDs and some mist filters that I use. I'm not a big fan of the proprietary filter size here, and I'd much prefer a system where I could use filters from any brand I wanted, but for the price and weight, it's a pretty good deal. And beyond just keeping rain off the lens, when you're constantly putting cameras on car seats or on the ground like I do, being able to shut the flag to protect your lens is really great as well. While we're talking about lenses, I don't use anything different when I'm in a tough environment. I own 2 Fuji MK Cinema Zooms, a bunch of Sigma Primes, a 70-200, and a 100mm macro. I don't really change this setup from job to job, though if weight is an issue, I might leave a few behind. The only big thing I think makes lenses more vulnerable than others is when they telescope in and out when you zoom, like most 24-70s or 24-105s do. That's where a lot of dust and sand or whatever can get inside, but there's really not much you can do about that other than try and buy lenses where all the movement happens internally. For me, gear is meant to be used though, and just get the lenses that make sense for your budget and use them. I made a whole video about zooms versus primes as well that I'll link to somewhere up there that you might want to check out as well. I support my whole setup on what I think is the world's greatest tripod for documentary filmmakers, which is the Sachtler Flowtech, but I think they call it the Active now. I use the 100mm Bowl version, but the 75mm version is a bit cheaper and will work for most cameras as well. This thing is really expensive at about $5,000 when you buy it with a head, but man is it worth it. The Flowtech is all carbon, so it's as light as any tripod I've ever used while still being really strong. You can submerge it in water, wash it with a garden hose, and mine even got shot in Mexico twice and kept working. Most cinema tripods weigh 2 or 3 times as much, and there's just no way you'd want to carry one of those up a mountain or through the rainforest. Having the ability to get a tripod into a remote area and get some stable shots can help up your production value a lot, and it's light enough to just lash it to the side of your backpack and go. I finally had to send mine in for servicing after 4 years of absolute abuse, so I don't have it with me, but I can't recommend these tripods enough. Save up for one, and you'll probably never need to have another one for the rest of your career. I made an entire video about the Flowtech, and I'll also link to that. Okay, so that's the camera system, but what about lights? If I'm in a really remote area and weight is a problem, lights might be the first thing to be ditched. It's great to have a big light and a 4-foot softbox for your interviews, but they definitely won't hold up well in a windstorm, and I don't think my Aperture 300D would last long in the rain. More likely, I'll bring these 1x1 panels made by Westcott. These were some of the first lights I bought, and they just keep working. The panels themselves are waterproof, and you can power them with the same V-mount batteries I run the camera off of, and I can fit 2 of them plus all their accessories into a single backpack. Now they're only 1x1, and even with the softbox attachment, you're never gonna get the same sort of soft light that you would from a big light dome or something, but when shooting in harsh environments, it's always gonna require some trade-offs, and at least with these, you can have some sort of lighting, which is always better than nothing. Ideally, I do the really important sit-down interviews before or after, and then leave the big lights behind and just use these in the field. You can roll them up, you can gaff tape them to the ceiling, they're magnetic, so you can stick them in the fridges or heating ducts, and they're just really easy to get into all sorts of different places. These ones are about $1,000 a light, or you can buy them in a set of 2, and there are definitely cheaper panels out there, but I use these because of the build quality. I beat the hell out of these things and leave them out in all sorts of bad weather, and they just keep working. So for me, it's totally worth it. Some of the knockoff brands might cost $1/4 of the price, but if they go down on you in the middle of a big shoot, it's a problem. Plus, I hate the idea of creating mountains of e-waste because I had to buy new lights every year. Buy nights or buy twice, and if you can swing it, these ones are nice for sure. They also come in 2x1 and 3x1 and all sorts of different sizes, but I find these ones are easy to carry and do a pretty good all-around job in tough conditions. I also have a couple of these Westcott light tubes that can be really handy as well. They run on batteries or wall power, so you can put them on a Gorilla Pod and just add a little bit of extra pop to a scene. There are cheaper versions of these, like Young Noel makes one that I think is popular, but I don't think they have the build quality to take the kind of beating I put on my stuff. Those might be great for a studio environment, but for me, the Westcotts are worth it because of how solid they are. Both ends are capped in metal, and I've dropped these multiple times, and they just never quit on me. And as always, the ultimate piece of lighting diffusion is the humble shower curtain. If you can't really bring lights at all, tape one of these over a window or hang it from a tree, and boom, you've got a big soft source. They're super cheap, they weigh nothing, and I always try to keep one around. You can buy the expensive silks instead, but for me, this works just as well and costs about 90% less. Okay, so let's quickly talk about audio next. I use the Sennheiser G3 lav mics, and these things are just tanks. I'm pretty sure they upgraded to the G4 quite a while ago, but I've had the same set since 2015, and no matter what I do, it will not break. You can spend a lot more for a set of Electrosonics or something, and those are great, but for me, these are just such a great value that work no matter what. If you think your character is going to get absolutely soaking wet, a pro tip is to pop them inside a condom. It might seem a bit weird, but they'll stretch around the mics and keep them dry, and they won't make noise like a Ziploc bag might. Keep a couple with your mics, and you never know when they might save you. Finally, what do I carry all this stuff in? Well, for getting from point A to point B, Pelican cases are amazing. They're bomb-proof and you can run over them with the truck and they won't break. I have a couple of them and I love them, but they're also very heavy and impossible to carry on rough terrain. So once you get out of the city, they kind of need to stay in the car. For my actual shooting bags, I use the f-stop system pretty much exclusively. I got introduced to them a few years ago and I've been using them ever since. They're built more like hiking packs than camera bags, which means they're really tough and good for carrying heavy loads. I have a few f-stop bags, but I think their 50-liter Talopa is the best all-around bag out there. And with the rain cover they make, it can handle a lot of weather. They work with these little padded boxes called ICUs that you can swap in and out depending on how much stuff you need to carry. Like you could carry a small ICU for a single zoom and a prime or two plus some spare batteries, and then pack a tent and sleeping bag in the top of the bag. Or a big ICU and bring 6 lenses, a bunch of batteries, and a drone. It's a really versatile system and I can't recommend it enough. I also made another video about why I think f-stop bags are the best out there, which should pop up there as well. And lastly, if you're gonna work in a really rough environment, make sure you bring tools to keep it all running. At a bare minimum, bring a multi-tool and some lens tissues, but if possible, I try to bring my full pouch with Allen keys, a blower, paintbrush, and other little bits that make keeping the camera working a lot easier. I also made a video about how to put together the ultimate tool pouch for filmmakers, so check that one out as well. I seriously better be on my game with these links in post. I feel like this is a new record. Oh yeah, and before I go, I wanted to share one of the more unusual things that I pack with me that I don't really hear people talk about too much. If you've ever been anywhere near a professional film set, you'll know that there are sandbags everywhere. They're super handy and they're used for everything from keeping light stand stable to counterbalancing mic booms. But if you're shooting documentaries, especially ones in hard to get to areas, a sandbag is the last thing you want to lug around. The solution is so simple, I have no idea why more people aren't talking about these things. Water bags. I don't even know how I heard about these, but they're made by Westcott, the same company that makes a lot of the other lighting gear I use. Basically, it's a tough Cordura bag with this water bladder inside that you can fill up and empty wherever you are. I filled these things up in public bathrooms with garden hoses and rivers, lakes, waterfalls, pretty much any source of water you can think of. Then you use these built-in hooks and straps to hang it off whatever you need to anchor it to, and you're done. If you still need more weight, fill it all the way up. If you need less, pour some out. When the scene is done and you're tearing down, dump the water out and shove it in your bag. It's such a simple solution to a problem I run into a lot as a documentary filmmaker, and I love things that solve problems without being overly complicated. I keep 2 of these things in my traveling kit, and whenever I break them out, directors love it, and most people have never seen them before. All right, I'm gonna call it there. I think I could probably come up with at least another 10 minutes of stuff I like to use in harsh environments, but I want to keep this video to a reasonable length. With those things, I can run a pretty complex shoot in some seriously difficult locations. And if you're thinking about getting into doc shooting that involves a lot of travel or maybe adventure related stuff, I think you'd be very happy with this setup. And as always, this is just what works for me, and you should absolutely start small and work your way up. If you have other things that you like that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments. That's it for today. Hope you found that video helpful. And if you did, think about subscribing. I'll have more videos like this every week and it really helps the channel. And maybe check out this other video I mentioned about the Sachtler Flowtech. It really is the best run and gun tripod out there in my opinion. See ya.